Okay, good evening. This is Tuesday, April 3rd, 2018. We are here at the Islington Community Center for a meeting, the latest meeting of the Islington Center Task Force. We have a couple of things on the agenda tonight. We'll start first with our miscellaneous updates. So, Nora, as always, we'll look to you for our miscellaneous updates.
The only real update we have since the last meeting are some revisions to the plans for the Islington Center redevelopment project. There's nothing else necessary to update, so we can maybe take that up under the next discussion.
Okay. So for anyone who's watching, the next planning board meeting on the Islington Center area is tomorrow at the Downey School at 7 o'clock. All right, so next on the agenda we have the Islington Center redevelopment proposal, review of the application for the FUMOD special permit, and consideration of recommendation to the planning board. So I'll just start by saying, so we have delayed town meeting, and we are not going forward on Monday the 7th, but we have now rescheduled it to Wednesday, May 30th. So based on that, part of the reason, and I can give you a little insight, the selectmen decided is because we don't really have all the numbers yet to be able to present it to the public so that they can have a say in the final numbers. So I don't know, I'm just going to leave it to everyone else whether or not they want to take a vote at this point in time. I guess my question is, if we don't vote tonight, when would we vote?
So the planning board is expected to have a meeting tomorrow night on the 4th with the Conservation Commission for further discussion on the project. Then the planning board is expected to meet on April 10th and make a decision on the special permit at that time. So this is the last time that the Islington Center Task Force will be meeting prior to the April 10th planning board meeting when the planning board has to make a decision. So if you intend to give a recommendation to the planning board, tonight would be the night to discuss and vote on that recommendation.
And I think what we're looking to do is, what we need, or what's left, is the financial aspect, which I don't think is necessarily this discussion. That's one of the boards.
Right, that's not really even part of the planning board discussion. The planning board will be voting on the application itself, on the FMUOD special permit application, the layout and the configuration of the proposed development, not so much on the funding. The funding goes to the question of how the town will afford to relocate and construct an addition to Wentworth Hall. It's not directly related to the development plans that will be approved in the special permit.
So has everyone seen the latest plans that have been proposed at the planning board for our voting members? Not our affiliated members, but for the voting members. Have you had a chance to see what's taken place lately, or the latest revisions? And now, my only question was, we don't know where the planning board stands as far as CBS, right?
So the latest plan set that you have here was delivered on March 30th. The last planning board plan set was delivered on March 8th, and the planning board reviewed that on March 20th. At that time, they had two options for CBS. One was a facility of just over 13,000 square feet with no drive-through, and the other option was a facility that was 9,500 square feet with a drive-through. Subsequent to the March 20th planning board meeting, the developer was able to convince CBS to entertain a building that's under 10,000 square feet with no drive-through. I have every reason to believe that that would be of interest to the planning board and that they would prefer to take the options 1 and 2 they've already reviewed, the large one without a drive-through and the smaller one with the drive-through, and replace them with the new proposal. But the planning board hasn't actually met since those plans have come in, so I haven't heard from them. But I think they probably would be looking for advice from this task force on which of those 3 options you would recommend that they consider.
So I think the presentation, for those who didn't have a chance to see the presentation that Nora made, the combined selectmen FinCom meeting, in my opinion, was probably the most thorough overview of the project I've seen. And the only change, Nora, then from that presentation is what size of the CVS, is that correct?
That's right. So that the PowerPoint presentation didn't include the third option for the CVS, which is a 9,950 square foot option without a drive-through. But I did hand out paper copies, which I received immediately before that meeting. So now what I've done is I've updated that PowerPoint and given you copies of it here, and that includes the revised plans. I've also included the full plan set. So you can see all the plans that are current, including that revised version.
What I would do, in my opinion, would be the following, that if the developer and CVS can reach a consensus on what I'll call the approximately 10,000 square foot facility, is that without a drive-through?
That's without a drive.
I mean, to me, that's a tremendous movement from where it originally started. So to me, I would be strongly in favor of that, although I was comfortable with, to be frank, with the, once the drive-through was eliminated, I thought it was an important accommodation to the residents, not having the drive-through. But I was not as concerned myself about the size of the CVS. I mean, frankly, when I walk into the CVS here, as I did the Vice Mayor, it seems mighty small to me. I mean, it just doesn't seem. So I was comfortable. So I would be totally supportive either one of those, the non-drive-through or the smaller drive-through. The other thing I would say is if anybody hasn't had a chance to watch Nora's presentation at the FinCom, which I think is online, Nora, it's on WestCat, it's probably the most thorough overview of the 2.5 years of work that has been put in. I also think it addressed in a very professional way numerous concerns raised by local residents in a very, very strong, powerful way. I thought it was an excellent presentation. So for those of you who get a chance to get bored some night, turn on WestCat TV, which I think is excellent, and watch it. And I would assume, Nora, that's the same presentation you'll be making, sort of like at a town meeting. I would assume if we get that far.
Similar but shorter, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So it was so, and the feedback I've had, I can't speak for the FinCom as an entity, but from a couple of the members, were just extremely impressed with your and the planning board's responsiveness to some of the issues that have been raised. So I'm very much, if I would encourage us to take a vote tonight, I think that's one of the roles we've been asked to perform, and a recommendation to, are we going to recommend to the planning board and the FinCom board? I'm not quite sure what we're doing here.
You are certainly welcome to recommend to us.
My vote here would be to recommend approval of the project in its current format, subject to final negotiations between the selectmen and the developer on the final financial arrangement. But I would be very supportive of letting the planning board know we're in favor of it, and then same thing to the FinCom. And one of the reasons is I think that this board and a lot of the town folks listen to the concerns of the citizens and really have done everything we can to accommodate them. And I think, to me, that's one of the roles we have as citizen volunteers, who are appointed to serve in these boards. And I feel for both, with my Islington Task Force hat and my FinCom hat on, that this project, and as guided by Nora and Abby, and working with the developer in the town, have been very responsive to the needs as expressed by the citizens.
Thank you, George. Anyone else? Comments?
I'm sorry I missed that presentation. It probably would have been a good idea for me to review that prior to today, but given that I haven't, could I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
I want to go back to the original RFP and just make sure that I understand how the threshold criteria are being met before we vote. The threshold criteria originally were 32 parking spaces, and I'm clear that we have those municipal spaces in the new proposal. There was also a request to have equivalent space allocated. The library nets out because the library is remaining as a library. But I guess my first question is, how about the threshold criteria for the youth and family services and Westwood recreation space? In the RFP, we had tallied that at 11,000 square feet.
So in the RFP, what we had done is looked at the building. The net floor space in the building was 11,000 square feet. The 11,000 square feet was shared by the MMO, by Recreation, by Youth and Family Services, and by other organizations that use the space.
Yeah.
Then what we did was we met with each of the organizations to see what space they actually needed.
Yeah.
And the RFP is written in a way that the selectmen make a decision as to what the equivalent community space is that is needed. And they've made a decision that the proposed addition to Wentworth Hall, which would be approximately 8,000 square foot total building, including the library, which is just under 2,000 square feet, a new youth and family services office, which is about 2,000 square feet, and then a lower level, 4,000 square feet, that nets out to a community space that's slightly larger than this area here. So it would have a hall that would be used for all the community activities that are currently used in this hall or the downstairs hall, as well as all the recreational programs that take place in this building. They would all be relocated to the new hall that would be under Wentworth Library.
So maybe you can take a look at those, because I was having trouble understanding those. I saw the floor plans, so maybe you could walk me through the floor plans, just so that we're clear on.
Sure. So that is in your packet here. The folded sheet, the top of it has the architect's estimate of the cost. If you open that up, there's the basement plan, the large multi-purpose space, which is just under 3,000 square feet. And that is equivalent to a space that is slightly larger than this. Obviously not with ceiling heights that we have here, but with just as much usable area, more usable area, because we won't have these benches in it. No. And it's fully handicapped accessible, fully code compliant, and energy efficient. It has an elevator. If you actually flip over and look at the first floor, that's probably the way that is easiest to understand it. So you have the rectangle at the bottom of the page where you see circulation desk, reading room, director's office, stair, storytelling, and bathroom. That is the existing Wentworth Hall building. So that's the historic library that would be moved over and located on that site. Then the rectangle behind that is the addition. You'd enter the addition on the left side where you see that orange box. You'd walk into a new lobby area, and that lobby would have access to an elevator, to a stairway, and to 2 accessible restrooms. And you would have a doorway to the left that you'd go into the Youth and Family Services reception area, or you would go to the right into the library. So this would be a handicapped accessible entrance to the Islington Library, as well as to the Youth and Family Services offices, and to the downstairs community space that would be on the lower level.
Okay, so the offices that are marked here, those are for youth and family
That's
services?
all Youth and Family Services,
Okay.
with the exception of the director's office on the lower right-hand corner, that's within the library.
And that's for the library director?
Right. So there would be 5 new Youth and Family Services offices and a conference room that those offices would share, as well as a copy area, reception area. These plans will change slightly. This is an early concept plan, so we have already met with the library director and Youth and Family Services director to make further revisions before we go into the full architectural review, which won't happen unless we're successful at town meeting. So we're not going to spend money on detailed architectural design if we don't know that we're going forward with this. So then if you flip the page over, you'll see the elevator and the stairs. They come down from that handicapped accessible library lobby upstairs, and that gets you to one very large room down in the lower level with its own restrooms on that floor. That room will be designed so that it can be bifurcated, so it could be divided into 2 halls or kept open for one large hall, depending on the needs here, something that we're not able to do with this room. So sometimes there are more than one user in this room at the same time. Acoustically, it's problematic. We would develop this in a way that we would be able to divide it into 2 spaces for recreational programs that don't need such a large space, but then have the ability to have it open as a single space when needed.
And have the Westwood Recreation and Westwood Youth and Family Services, they've gone on record as endorsing this and saying that this is an adequate swap out for the space they currently have?
Youth and Family Services have, we shared this with the Recreation Department, but I don't believe the Recreation Commission has taken a position on this.
But I did meet with the recreation director today, and we basically came to the agreement that as she is using this space, or recreation department is using this space, the way it's designed, so they're limited by that design of the space here. She will have to make accommodations to use this space, but she fully understands that and feels very comfortable that this will be a plus for the recreation department.
And all the programs that are currently here, whether they're morning programs used by youth groups or evening programs used by the Boy Scouts or some other community group, all the programs that go on in this building will be able to be accomplished in the new building.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the other, I guess the remaining threshold criteria was the figure 2.55 million compensation, and I saw there was, in this presentation, it alluded to that, but if you could walk us through that, that'd be
Sure.
appreciated.
Actually, the easiest way to go through that is if you pull up the printout of the PowerPoint. It'll show you. Find the page so I can direct you to the right section. If you look at page 27, it shows the prices that were requested for the different parcels that are being sold under the RFP. The municipal parking lot was valued at $6,000, Wentworth Hall was valued at $750,000. This Islington Community Center parcel was valued at $1.2 million, and the small driveway parcel was valued at $25,000 for a total value of $2,575,000. Now, if you flip ahead to page 30, let me take it back. Let me go straight through. So then go to page 28. So go from 27 to 28. 28 explains the procedure, how we're swapping land and receiving land back. So the town is initially giving Petruzziello all 1.48 acres, all 4 parcels. So that shows you 0.69 acres for municipal parking lot, 0.28 acres for the Islington Community Center parcel, Wentworth Hall is 0.44, and the driveway is 0.07. All adds up to 1.48. But then Petruzziello is giving back to the town a total of 0.927 acres. And that will come in town parcel 1, which will be the future site of Wentworth Hall and the new municipal parking lot, and town parcel 2, which is an open space parcel in the back of the lot. The current plans, actually, I think it's slightly larger than are shown in this version. We haven't gotten the revised numbers. Instead of 2 separate lots, it's now 1 connected lot, so it's actually a little bit larger. But this is a worst case scenario. The town gets back, gives about 1.5 acres, gets back almost an acre. So the total land area that we're actually transferring is 0.553 acres.
And can you just, is there a plot plan that we should be looking at?
Sure. If you
This land
turn
plan?
to C6 and C7 in the large plan set. So if you look at C6, you can see a line dividing town property from Petruzziello property. And it starts near the top left of the page, goes straight across, and then comes down and kind of makes a jagged angle. Everything to the top and right of that line will be town land. I don't think this document, I don't think it contains the square footage. We'll need to get updated numbers on what the revised square footage is. So it's somewhere approximately 1 acre that we're getting back from them. So if you then, the other land is on page C7 on the east side of Washington Street. That land is all going to the developer. So there'll be no town land when this is complete on the east side of Washington Street that's part of the RFP process. All the town land will be on the west side of Washington Street. So jumping back to the PowerPoint slides, so now if you turn to slide 29, 29 shows you on the School Street side, we're giving 0.9 acres to Petruzziello. Petruzziello is giving to the town either 0.88 acres or 0.93 acres. That was depending on the schools, the Blue Heart Tavern parcel. Those numbers will be updated. It's slightly more on both of them. Now, if you turn to page 30, this is where it explains the funding. The RFP price, when you deduct out the land that we're getting back, would require that we receive from Petruzziello $1,975,000, which is equivalent to $57.39 per square foot, or $2.5 million per acre. That's what we're looking to get back a minimum of. The current offer that we received and that was included in the planning board's application was 1.725 so slightly less than that. But just to show you what that amounts to is a value per square foot of over $50, $50.12, or $2,183,544 per acre. And for comparison's sake, I threw in the assessed values of land elsewhere in town. The Roach Brothers site, which is the closest here, runs $6 an acre. Eversource property, which is probably the most premier property that we have in town, is $10.74 an acre. Wegmans, which is a brand new structure, is $21.70 per square foot, and Target costs out at $24.04 a square foot. So even if the town accepted the current offer that's on the table, while it would be less than the RFP amount, it would be more than twice the value of the land in the highest price parcel we have in town. So now we're expecting the number that's been offered to the town to go up. What we're waiting for is an appraisal that the town has ordered on the town parcels, the 4 parcels that we're proposing to give to the developer before we get land back. And that appraisal is expected at the end of next week, I believe. So I believe by the 15th of April. So when we see that proposal, the developer has already agreed to meet the amount of that appraisal. It's a bank appraisal, and it's acceptable to his bank. We'll receive the full value of those parcels. That appraisal is not the same as what we're asking for in the RFP, which was our estimated value, the current value of the land. The appraisal we're looking for is an estimated value of the post-development value of the land. So not the value of the land with the buildings that sit on it today, but the value of the land with the improvements that the developer would undertake. So we'll see when that proposal comes in. We're hoping it comes as close to the $3.5 million we need for the Wentworth Hall work as possible. We don't expect it to cover that full amount, but we're hopeful that it will.
Quite expect it to cover that.
We're actually
We're
hoping
hopeful.
to come in higher.
Okay. Well, we can place bets, but my point is, from that slide, what it shows is if you could get the if the appraisal came even at 1.975, it would be fully consistent with the RFP.
Any other questions? Any other members?
I just want to make it clear that the RFP price was established using the assessor's prices,
Correct.
which always lag the market by almost a year, just because that's the way the taxes run. So the economy has been good, land values have been going up and not down. So I would expect that if those are true values reflective of the price that was in the past, the current price should be better than what the assessed values were. So we feel confident that the values will go up.
And Nora, the increase, I think you mentioned this in the FinCom presentation, the increase in taxes to the town before and after is quite a...
So that's another sheet you have in your packets. I think there's a few trees tonight, printing everything out for you. But if you find the other folded document that's in your pile, looks like this. This shows the town's property value before and after the proposed development, and also shows the private-owned property tax receipt estimates before and after. So if we first look at the town value, the before value of the 4 town-owned properties is $2,487,950, and then we subtract from that capital needs that have already been demonstrated at $1,9,832. We end up with a value minus needs of $587,118 is the value for the 4 properties today. Now, if we go down to right below that, the after value, assuming that we move Wentworth Hall, build the addition, the value of the property, the building alone would be $3.5 million. That doesn't even account for the value of the 1 acre of land that building would sit on. I also included in the last column the net revenue from the buildings, Right now, our net revenue for the 4 buildings under current conditions is a negative value, just over $1,000 a year. And that is the cost of running these buildings, specifically this building here, less the rent that we currently receive from MMO and from community uses that in some cases pay a rental fee for the property. The cost of running the buildings will go up because we will no longer be receiving rent from MMO, but the cost to maintain the buildings will go down because we will have less space, less wasted space, and more energy efficient space. So we're expecting the cost for the properties in Islington Center to be just under $50,000. That is probably overinflated because I've used the maintenance and upkeep fees. The cost of maintenance and upkeep have been prorated by square footage from what it is in this building to what it would be in the new building. And because this building is far less efficient, I expect the cost to be decreased. Now, if you go to the bottom of the page, you look at the private property before and after. What we're comparing there is the real estate taxes that the town would receive from these properties. We're currently receiving $68,730 in income, real estate taxes from all of the Petruzziello properties. After this proposal, we would expect to receive $507,446. These are annual tax receipts. In addition, we'd expect to receive over $10,000 in annual excise taxes from the cars that would be associated with the condominiums in the building that would go on this site. And then what I've done is I've deducted out from that the estimated service costs. Clearly, there are service costs with all the buildings that are there today. I don't have a way of estimating what the existing service costs are, so we're taking those as the ground level, assuming those are zero, and then all the additional costs are over and above that. And our peer review consultant estimated that the cost, including police, fire, and educational costs for 3 students that are projected to live in the 18 condominiums, would be just about $53,000. So I've deducted that from the tax receipts, and it shows that we go from net tax receipts currently of $68,730 to net tax receipts of $464,526 a year. So a significant year-over-year tax increase that we would see from this project, as well as a significant increase in the value of the town property.
To me, it seems like that's the most compelling aspect of the proposal. Because I guess what I'm struggling with is, right now, because of some complication in wage law, there's no renovations being done for the town by the developer, is that right? Instead, it's going to be the $1.7 million in cash.
That's right. So when we spoke about this project just over a year ago, last March, I believe, when we had one of our task force meetings, the developer's attorney threw out the number of $5 million of value that the town would be receiving, and at that time, he was counting Blue Heart Tavern, which we expected to receive in a renovated fashion, and it was counting the addition, moving Whitman Hall, putting an addition on it, redoing the parking lot, doing all the work that goes into the project, but the developer was expecting to do the work themselves. They then found out that that would require them paying prevailing wages for all the work, and decided that rather than do that, they'd prefer to pay the town what they otherwise would spend in doing the work and let the town do it ourselves. So that's where we are today. One of the differences is that the Blue Heart Tavern is no longer part of the cost of restoring the Blue Heart Tavern is no longer part of the project. There's land set aside as a place where the Blue Heart Tavern could go, but we're still working on an outside option for how that building gets moved and restored. That's been separated from the project.
And the 1.7 is going to be about half the cost of what it will take to
just about half. We expect it, so our estimate is just over $3.5 million, and that's an early concept estimate. It's not based on final architectural plans, so the number could go up or the number could go down. We also don't know what the conditions will be a year from now when we're ready to actually put shovel in the ground and get that work done. But that's the number that we're estimating the cost.
And the net new space for that building is 6,000 square feet.
Correct.
And so the developer's funds will cover about half of that, so it's the equivalent of the developer basically providing the town with about 3,000 square feet of refurbished space. Right.
Well, I would say, I wouldn't look at it that way. I'd say that the developer is providing cash to allow the town to do that work. So what we have today is we have a building that's 11,000 square feet that has about the equivalent amount of usable space as the new building that we're proposing, the addition to Wentworth Hall. But we also have liabilities on this building that give it a negative value. We estimate the value of this property, including the building, at $1.2 million, but we know that we have a $1.7 million cost just to keep this running in its current non-accessible, non-compliant, non-efficient condition. So I see this right now as a negative value, and I see the value of the new community center on the other side of the street as a significant positive value. And I think that that only comes from the development. So the developer going forward with this is what allows us to make that investment. But it's, at this point, the $1.725 million does not cover the town's cost in doing that work. We're hoping that number increases. We don't know and won't know for a week and a half or so how much of that the town's cost in that will be covered.
When we started this process, it's been, as you said, George, a couple of years ago, the original proposal was talking about having a renovated Blue Heart Tavern, about 2,900 square foot, an addition onto Wentworth Hall for 5,000 square foot, renovating the main library portion, which is just under 2,000 square foot, and adding a basement. So we're looking at 11,000 square foot roughly of renovated space. And I know there's been a lot of iterations and a lot of compromises and changes from apartments to condos. But I'm sure you can understand, I think some people are going to look at this and say, we were looking at a figure of 11,000 square feet of renovated space, and now we're looking at the equivalent of 3,000 square foot in renovated space.
Well, I don't know, the Blue Heart Tavern, certainly when the RFP went out, the Blue Heart Tavern wasn't part of it. So the original proposal addressed the Blue Heart Tavern as a hope for space, but I don't think it was clear in that proposal that that space would be owned by the town in addition to the community center. I think that was still being discussed, as I recall, that there was a possibility of that Blue Heart Tavern being restored for commercial use or possibly for town use.
This here says give the town restored and updated Blue Heart Tavern, but a lot's changed. I guess I'm just struggling to get my head around what the net is for the town. The net for the town is going to be basically, the way I'm hearing it is disposition of a costly asset. We're looking at that as a win.
I believe
In other words, giving away this building in that frame of mind is a net win for the town.
selling this building, yes. I would say selling this building is a net win for the town because it puts the land on a tax roll and gives us the ability to move our services to a more appropriate facility.
But I would add to that, because I think it's a very valid point that's been brought up, but the way I view it is the following way, that Islington has always been concerned about the library, and when we built the new library, one of the biggest issues was, would we be able to support and have an Islington branch? This, to me, solidifies the town's commitment to having, frankly, a much more usable, state-of-the-art library. Number two, the cost of renovating this building, because as a member of the FinCom, I wouldn't be in favor of pumping money into this building just to bring it up to code. And my sense is the number to make it truly a functional building, you know, where it would have state-of-the-art handicapped accessible, really usable space, et cetera, will be, you know, $3-4 million. I would be very,
$4.9 million.
how much?
4.9. Yes.
4.9 million, which it would be very hard for me, who loves new projects in town, but it would be very hard for me to support that as a member of FinCom. I'm just speaking for myself. This was an asset the town bought for $500,000 to protect, in a sense, to give it some assets. Also, the same way, I guess the parking lot originally was going to be, was a gas station, it was going to be a muffler shop, as I recall. So the way I look at it, we're smart to grab these assets. Now is the opportunity, can we create some real functionality for the town? So to me, we're getting a new library, we're getting space for the Youth and Family Services, and MMO, which is obviously very important to a lot of folks. Frankly, it sort of gets us out of that ball game. That's going to be a relationship directly with the developer. So I see it, I understand the comments. I think they're well taken, but there has been a lot of evolution. and a lot of change. And I think if we're trying to encourage reasonable development that meets all the needs we've heard from the citizens, I think we get a state-of-the-art library. If there is something that can be done with Blue Heart Tavern, my understanding is a lot of the historical work has been basically taken out of the building. It's not, doesn't have all the original decor and stuff like that inside, but if we can get somebody who decides, almost like we did with the Colburn School, to come in and, you know, make something out of it, we'd have that option. But we get a library, we get community space, and I also think we get, you know, some further very nice development in Islington, and we'll maybe set a model for other needs. And the other thing I would point out, the shift from, you know, one of the financial shifts that took place was a shift from condominiums to rentals, which I think affects the developers. I'm sorry, from rentals to condominiums affected the financial offer we were going to get from the developer. But it seemed that the residents were a lot more comfortable with condominiums than they were with apartments, whereas I was actually totally comfortable with apartments. So I think it raised valid concerns, but I still, at the end of the day, I don't think we're going to see an opportunity like this come along, you know, for the town to get some of the things I think that will really be desirable in this part of town.
And then the other value that I think we have to discuss is the value of the affordable units that are added to the town's subsidized housing inventory. This project is required to provide 3 units. The way the project is structured, it's actually going to provide 12 units instead of 3, by putting one of the units in the existing mixed-use development at 321 Washington Street. That puts an extra 9 units on our subsidized housing inventory over and above those that are required by this project, and they're sorely needed and coming at a very good time for the town.
By the way, Nora, I did a little research on that project in Needham. I think it's called Madera, and it's 136 units, but 10% of the units have to be 3 bedrooms. And if people are concerned about the impact on schools, a 3-bed, you know, having 14 or 15 3-bedroom units come in, that's going to be an impact on the schools. And I just encourage anybody, take a look. Every time I drive down 128 now, I take a look at that thing, I shake my head, because if you drive down Greendale Avenue, that's a residential neighborhood. And that's where that project went. So I think your point of trying to have options available for affordable housing is extremely important.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry. Are we still talking about widening up East Street?
No.
Is that still part of that?
So the planning board had rejected the idea of widening East Street. They thought that the gains for having slight improvements to the traffic flow were negated by the detriments to pedestrian traffic. So you'd be widening the street, lengthening the crosswalk. They did not think it was worth it. So one of the changes to the project is that we will maintain additional right-of-way. So the new building that replaces this will be set back further from the intersection, and the town will maintain that right-of-way, so that if in the future a widening of the street is absolutely necessary, we'll have the ability to do it without having to pay for the land. But we're not proposing to widen it this time. We are proposing signalization changes, concentrating on a left turn signal from southbound Washington Street onto East Street.
Thank you.
How many additional right-of-ways do we have, especially on the back? Do we have other right-of-way individual ones on these folks? On that is
There's an easement.
Stanford Place. There's several.
There's an easement currently. If you go through the parking lot where we came to here and you go past CVS, there's an easement that goes to the house. There's one house that is only accessed off the parking lot. It doesn't actually have any street frontage. Stratford Place ends,
Exactly.
and that house has no frontage. So there is an easement for those owners to get there, and for anyone on Stratford to get through. That easement remains in place. And the parking configuration on the lot, if you look at Plan C7, shows the aisle that's there now remains.
Can I ask you a question? If you
Yes.
go with the smaller CVS with no drive-through, what does that add to the layout? Or what does it add?
That layout that you see there has the smaller CVS.
That's the small one.
That's the smaller one. So what it does is it allows you to pull further away from the 21 School Street, which is the first residential
So you
property
have a big
adjacent to
buffer
it.
If it's
between,
more.
and pulling in and out of that, you're not gonna be able to, if you're coming out of CVS, will you be able to take a right or on the left, or how's that gonna work?
Cars will be able to take a right or a left, trucks will only be able to take a left. So trucks will have to go out to Washington Street. They will not be able to go through the School Street, Pine Lane neighborhood. But cars would be able to go either right or left under the current plan. I will just emphasize, the planning board has not reviewed this plan yet. So this is what the developer has proposed, the planning board will have to take a look at it.
Nora, I'm sorry, I just can't see the status for Blue Hill Tavern. There's a parentheses here that says if the developer restores it.
Yes, so that also, if you go back to Plan C6, and you'll see that the Blue Heart Tavern has its own lot
Yeah.
on this plan, and the building is shown there on that lot. The question is whether the town will own that land, where the Blue Heart Tavern goes, whether the developer will own that land, or whether it'll be transferred to a third party who's interested in restoring that, and that's still up in the air. So the land disposition agreement is written so that any one of those three options is possible, whichever option is most likely to lead to the restored Blue Heart
Blue Heart
Tavern.
Tavern.
So we're trying to save the building and not knowing what the options are now, not knowing who it is that will come up with the funds to restore it. We want to maintain all options, so whether it be the town, the developer, or a third party.
And what's the thought on the town restoring it, given that it cost about $1 million to restore?
It does, so the only way that the town would restore that
Yeah.
is if there's a town meeting article that puts funding towards that, or if the town, there's been talk recently of the Community Preservation Act. If the town enacts the Community Preservation Act at some future town meeting, that could provide funding for historic preservation. But either way, there would have to be some town action. I don't believe that the town is likely to restore the Blue Heart Tavern, but we're leaving the option open in the land disposition agreement in case it gets to that point. The developer is also still looking at the possibility of him restoring the property and putting it there, and if that's the case, then he would own that little square of land. And there are also a couple of residents in town that have expressed interest in that parcel and restoring it. So we're leaving all our options open.
Given that this project's going to net an increase in revenues for the town of $450,000 a year, it seems like it'd be relatively short money. It's like 2.5 year.
A short payback.
Yeah, short payback on that.
And that's why that's an option, that would require a town meeting option.
Because one of the things I know that the community is sensitive about is that Islington is not going to see a lot of the benefits from this project. That $400,000, it kind of disappears into the coffers without getting anything tangible for the community to use. So I know a lot of people would like to see that money, at least the first couple of years of it, be, to restore the Blue Heart Tavern.
So I would argue strongly that Islington sees as much benefit as any other portion of Westwood. Taxes go to provide services and facilities in the town that are used by all residents, no matter where they are, including this new community center, the Islington Library, and all of our schools that Islington residents use as much as anyone else. So I would
It's a
strongly
perception,
argue
and
against that.
sometimes perception's stronger than reality.
Fire services, police services, public works services. I don't think because you live in Islington, you have any less use for any of those services. So I would say that Westwood residents, Islington residents living in the center between the two, haven't decided what they call their residents. I think we all benefit from all the tax dollars that come to this town.
With this site layout at the C6, if this gets all voted and approved or not approved, how does the parallel parking, is it being included, or is it another future voting process on the parallel parking?
The parking on the street, is that no, that's part of this. That would be developed immediately. That would be in the first phase of the project, that would be on-street parking.
Thank you.
So just to talk about phasing a little bit, that's also addressed in the PowerPoint.
That's slide 31.
Yes.
Before you go to that, I want to raise one other issue on this quote-unquote benefit to Islington. If this project doesn't go through, the developer has certain rights on his property. And to
Yes.
me, and frankly, has the ability to do work that's going to lead to a lot more residential units than we have now. So I think that, to me, this is an opportunity for the Islington residents along with the town to have some control in a very positive way in terms of what gets developed and what doesn't get developed. But the developer does have right to develop his property, correct?
That's right. So if this project is not approved, development just doesn't come to a standstill. The developer owns land, and they will develop that in another means. The town owns land, and we'll continue to work on what we'll do with our land. We can't do nothing, because this building and Wentworth Hall are in need of work. So they can't stay the way they are indefinitely. We'll have to make some decisions. We believe that this project, working together, gets us the best benefit both for the private side and the public side, and has the greatest outcome for both. So that's why we're moving forward with this. If it's not successful, then we'll look at other options that are frankly less beneficial, but we will still look at them. On the developer side, they have options to develop all of their properties under the underlying zoning, the local business B zoning, or under a special permit, FMUOD special permit. Or if we're not successful in keeping above 10% on the SHI, the option of a 40B project comes in as well. So that this developer, as any developer, would have that option if we fall below 10%. We're doing our best to stay above 10%. This project happens to help us get much closer to staying above 10% with it than without it. But there are options. If a 40B project were considered on this side of the street, not with the town-owned land, just developer land, we could see as many as 40 apartments. If it was developed on the other side, we'd probably see in the area of 20 to 28 apartments. And again, as George brought up, those would not be restricted to one-bedroom apartments or two-bedroom condos. They would be a mix, including a minimum of 10% three-bedroom units, because that is what Department of Housing and Community Development now requires for 40B projects. So something will happen. It won't be nothing. And the developer spent money on the land, and so they will look for a return on their investment. I believe that the project we have here is the best for all.
So is the town susceptible to a hostile 40B project?
Not today. We would only be susceptible if in 2020, when the new census numbers come out, we fall below 10%. If we did not create any more affordable housing, we stuck with the affordable housing we have today, we know that in 2020 we would fall below 10%. So we're doing our best to create new affordable housing to keep us over 10%, and the 12 units that come with this go a long way to helping us do just that. So I want to talk a little bit about phasing. If you look at slide 31, it'll explain what the phasing of the project is proposed. It's over a minimum of 3 years for the project to take place, beginning almost immediately. So if this is approved at town meeting in May, we can expect the Attorney General to turn around our articles and give us final approval by September. And the developer would look to begin the first phase of development right away in September. So that first phase, the town would transfer the municipal parking lots, the land on the west side of Washington Street, to Petruzziello. Petruzziello would provide a cash payment to the town. The town, over the course of the project, would receive 3 cash payments. We'd receive the first one as soon as we transfer the municipal parking lot. Then Petruzziello would file for the subsidized housing inventory listing of 1 additional apartment in 321 Washington Street. That would enable us to list all 12 units in that building when we currently can only list 2. Then the town would design and bid out the work for Wentworth Hall to get an exact number on what it would cost us to do the work, and Petruzziello would construct the CVS building on the west side of Washington Street, as well as the parking lot for that building and the parking lot for the town building. Then in phase 2, the town would transfer the land on this side, the east side of Washington Street. We'd transfer the Wentworth Hall parcel to Petruzziello, and Petruzziello would transfer 2 new town parcels to the town. In this plan here that you see tonight, the most updated one, it's actually 1 large parcel. In all of the documents we've discussed before, it was 2 separate ones. Then Petruzziello would also provide cash, the second cash payment to the town, and the town would use that to move Wentworth Hall, to renovate the library, and to construct an addition. And then Petruzziello would renovate the existing CVS building right next door here, just on the other side of Wentworth Hall, to create new space for MMO. Then in the third phase, the town would transfer this building, this land under this building and the building itself, to Petruzziello, as well as the small East Street driveway parcel. Petruzziello would provide the final cash payment, and then Petruzziello would tear this down and construct a new mixed-use building where this is, as well as where the Wentworth Hall currently sits. And Petruzziello would, at that point, file for subsidized housing inventory listing of 2 additional apartments somewhere in Washington Street. The planning board is considering 256 Washington Street, which is the former ski stop, the location where Matt the Marber just moved. There are 2 existing apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor of that building, and the board is looking into whether they would qualify as affordable units. So at that point, we would own it, nothing on the east side of Washington Street, and we would own the parcel on the west side with the relocated hall with an addition and a fully renovated space with an open library and youth and family services building, and then we could move all of the uses that are in this building today into that brand new building before this building is torn down. And MMO could move from this building to their new space in the existing CVS building before this building is torn down. So everything is carefully crafted and staged so that everything that needs to get done will be done in proper sequence. And as you can see then, the portion of the project that is probably the most financially beneficial to the developer is the final phase, where the condominiums are constructed and sold.
How long is all that take?
A minimum of 3 years.
Realistically, 4 or 5.
No, on the C6, that open space, is that conservation land?
That is currently privately owned land. That's the part of the tailor shop lot right now. The town owns a parcel next to it, but I don't believe that one is conservation land. I'm not sure if it is. I don't think it is. I think it's just town-owned land that's next to it, and this would be town-owned land. So not necessarily restricted for conservation use.
Okay, so it's built.
But it's not, there's wetlands on this lot here, which is one of the items that will be discussed at tomorrow night's concurrent meetings of the planning board and the Conservation Commission. There is an isolated wetland on that property, so I don't expect it to be built. I think one of the reasons the town is looking to receive that land is to prevent it from being built on in the future, to let that land serve as a buffer between the commercial portion of the property along Washington Street and the residential portion along School Street.
I just look at it like we're trading acreage for acreage, right? There's a swap, but we're valuing them at equivalence, and they're not on the market. I don't think you would value a corner lot with that lot at equivalence. And if that's wetlands, raises the question: is it even buildable? And that further. But that's just a side note.
And we didn't value them equivalently. So if you looked at the RFP, we assigned a lesser value to the property on the west side of Washington Street than we did on the east side. And now we're waiting for the appraisal that we think will show that the property on the east side is worth even more than we valued it in our RFP. And if that's the case, we'll receive additional compensation. So we're giving away about a half an acre of land, and we're receiving right now 1.7 million. We hope to get closer to 3.5 million for that half acre of land. No matter which number you look at, a half acre of land in Westwood is just not worth that much.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So why don't we do 2 votes? First, will we take a vote?
Can I just make one point that
Yes.
there's been a consistent, and I heard it again last night, a consistent argument that there's not enough parking, and that we're not providing enough parking in this project for the uses across the street, which are in the ball field. The fact is that I think that I've heard and listened and know that this developer in particular has had terrific success in the concept of shared parking, where the people who are living in the condominiums will not be in their homes certain times of the day when parking is needed for some of the commercial activity, the MMO and things like that. And that this parking is because there are a lot of uses and they're spread out in their peak times, that there is plenty of parking. And that this project is not necessarily, never wasn't part of the RFP, required to, but he's not, he has stated publicly that he's not averse to letting folks that are gonna use the park across the street park in the parking lots of his properties. So it will continue to serve the same purpose that it serves today. And I think that, you can back me up, but I think that there is not a parking problem. There's a lot made of a parking
Right.
problem, but there isn't a parking.
So there is another slide that addresses that. If you look at slide 58, and I've given you the backup for that, which is a memo from Beta. It was dated March 15th and actually just revised today. That looks at the parking, and it shows that it looks at it on both sides of the street, School Street and East Street, and then in total as well. It looks at existing parking. On the School Street side, we have an existing demand of 31 spaces, and existing parking is provided 45 spaces. So we have 14 extra parking spaces currently on the School Street side of the property. Afterwards, the proposed demand will be 65, and we'll have 78, which will be an excess of 13 spaces on the School Street side of the property. On the East Street side of the property, the current demand is 69 spaces, where only 55 spaces are provided, so they're actually short 14 spaces on this side of the street today. After the project, the demand will be 98 spaces, and there'll be 100 spaces provided, so we're actually providing 2 spaces more than are needed on this side, the east side of Washington Street. Then looking at those as a total, today the existing demand is 100 spaces, and there are 100 spaces provided, which says that there is not a parking problem today. And the proposed demand is 163 spaces. 178 spaces will be provided, so we will be providing 15 extra spaces when this project is complete, above what we have now. So the parking situation is actually benefited by this project. The only parking shortage on this side of town has to do with the 2 town-owned open space parcels, the School Street Playground and Morrison Park. Both of those parcels have insufficient parking for the needs that they have. Morrison Park, when there are 2 baseball games on an evening, and one baseball game is finishing up and people are coming to the second one, there's often no place for those people coming to the second game to park. People often park in the CVS parking lot. Some park in Roach Brothers, where you can very safely walk from Roach Brothers to Morrison Park without a problem. Some park in the CVS lot or the ICC Wentworth Hall lot, walk down to the intersection and cross there, that's fine. But unfortunately, a large number of people park in the CVS or Wentworth Hall lot and walk across the street mid-block. It's something that we are looking to discourage. The parking spaces will be here under the new project, and people will probably use it in the same way, and the town will continue to discourage as best we can people from doing that. There's plenty of extra parking in Roach Brothers. There's extra parking in the municipal lot, but people don't seem to want to walk to those spaces. So the project doesn't take away spaces. It in fact adds spaces. It adds spaces on both sides of the street. It doesn't make anything worse. But the parking problem for Morrison Park and the parking problem for School Street will continue to exist unless the town is somehow able to create more parking spaces at those 2 locations. We hope that in the future we'll have an option for creating more parking spaces at Morrison Park. School Street, my hope is that with the municipal lot having a clear access through the CVS lot, people might be encouraged to park there and walk rather than park all along School Street and Pine Lane the way they do now.
The Pine Lane and the School Street parking area, we have a resident who could probably back me up. There are certain times of the year where that's particularly bad. In the early spring, when the mothers, after many, many months of being locked in the house, the first few days that it's really nice, that's when you have the parking problem. It is really a limited problem. It's not a persistent problem. It tends to peak in the early spring for that very reason. Nice days.
We have the little K-ball games, there's these 2
Yes.
of them going on
Yes.
simultaneously, and the cars are just hanging from the trees. There's just no way to put the cars in.
So we will have more parking for CVS and parking associated with Wentworth Hall. There'll be more parking on that side of the street. Hopefully some of those cars will park in those spaces and walk over safely at the intersection to get
Well,
to
that's
that.
the key, it has to be safe. And, there is a crosswalk kind of halfway down the hill, which I watched from the kitchen window. And when it's not busy traffic, the cars will stop for the mountains with carriages and things. But if it's rush hour, they're not really stopping. So, I don't know if there's a light or something would be beneficial putting in there.
Yeah, that crosswalk is unfortunately too close to the intersection.
And I don't
She
know
really
where else
shouldn't, really shouldn't have one that close to the intersection because people who travel through an intersection aren't expecting to stop again so quickly.
Yeah,
So-
but I'm not sure, where else would you?
Well, they should cross at the intersection is where they really should.
Oh, go down
cross.
to the intersection.
Yeah.
Which is
So
scary.
they're already at it.
But that's scary too. I personally wouldn't cross at the one that
Right.
doesn't seem as scary.
Which is fine.
I wouldn't
Some
take my
people-
kids down to that intersection, no
And
way.
if I could just note, Laura, on when the recreation department improved the School Street playground a number of years ago, there was a consideration of adding parking, but there was a big pushback from the neighbors
Yes.
not to add parking. And one of the comments that we heard frequently, because I was pushing for more parking, was that it's not a consistent problem, it's only an occasional one, and they didn't want to put more asphalt for an occasional problem.
Mike, in response to your question, should there be a vote, I feel we have, however one decides to vote tonight, I think we have an obligation to vote as members of this task force and trying to listen to all the issues, pro and con, raise whatever your opinions in it. I think that's our obligation, responsibility as members of this task force to vote.
Okay, so let's take a vote on first whether or not we should take a vote. So, all in favor of taking a vote this evening, raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay. Now, those in voting in favor of the project as it is proposed right now, which I guess the CVS is the only issue that hasn't been decided, and the compensation, right, which will still be up to the planning board.
The CVS will be up to the planning board, the compensation will be
Up to the
decided by the
Correct.
select board.
Okay, so excluding those two issues, which will be decided by others instead of this committee itself. Any comments before we vote on it?
I just would say, I would, if you want a motion, I would recommend a motion that we vote in favor of the project as that's been evolving over the last 2.5 years. And I think the CVS issue has been minimized by the fact it's either going to be, the drive-through's gone away, it's either going to be 10,000 with a drive-through or no drive-through. So I think we're going to end up with a CVS that people are satisfied with. And then subject to the selectmen and the developer having a mutual agreement on the financing.
Okay, we have a second?
Could I just, as a question, shouldn't the vote be more in terms of voting to recommend that the planning board,
We'll recommend
Grant
it to the
special
finance
permit and
commission
recommend
and the
that
planning board.
the
yeah.
finance and
as
board
opposed to
commission
voting whether you
vote
like it or
approval.
dislike it?
That's a good point, yeah. So I will change and then recommend that we're making a recommendation in favor to both the planning board and the finance and board commission.
Okay, I have a second? Okay, any discussion? So let me say, because I've been the chair and part of this, and I will be ultimately voting on the package, that regardless of how people feel, I think we have done extremely hard work to try to negotiate the best deal that's possible. Whether or not people come out and vote for it or vote against it, that will ultimately be for them to decide. But I think I can say, at least from my standpoint, that except for those two remaining issues, that we have done as much as we possibly can to get something that is acceptable to the town and, more importantly, acceptable to the neighborhood. So based on that, I will say, everyone in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. It is unanimous. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussion before we move on to the agenda?
I mean, any preference, would you give any preference to which option when it comes to the CVS discussion?
I think that would be helpful for the planning board if you'd recommend that you
Which
prefer that they
option?
go with the option with or without the drive-through, the larger or the smaller.
Okay.
And I would also, because I've heard them talk about it, I think there's an advantage to having an in and out at both entrances, and not just an out or an in at the entrance of School Street. And the reason why I'm saying that is, I think if you put it all on Washington Street, you could end up with some traffic problems in that intersection. Whereas if you spread the in and outs from the parking areas to the two places, so that people can go where they need to go most quickly, so those that need to go to School Street can go to School Street, and into the center of Westwood can go that way rather than having to go into Washington Street. I think that's important.
So the current option, smaller CVS without the drive-through with two-way traffic onto School Street or onto Washington Street is very similar to the existing CVS we have now, where it has the two ins and outs. And it allows traffic to decide which way works best during different times of the day, depending on where you're going. So I too think that the current option that has two-way traffic is the way to go.
From a public safety standpoint, it's also beneficial for us to be able not to have a bottleneck. So if there's a medical there, and you're trying to get apparatus and ambulances into that location, if there's a bottleneck, no one can get out of the way. Where if they have ins and outs either way, people can spread out and make room for public safety vehicles.
And
But I
also-
would also make sure that the planning board still considers that there will be no right-hand turn for trucks onto School Street.
And just for the, and I'll say that just for the record, it's also been discussed potentially putting through speed bumps in the CVS parking lot to prevent cut-through traffic. You just want to avoid the light and try to cut through, and that's, hasn't been fully vetted yet, but that is a possible option too, to prevent people from just cutting through and take the right onto School Street, so. All right, so, just before we vote out, I'm just gonna say that we worked hard on this as far as the drive-through. Originally, it was larger, we took the drive-through out, we got a larger store, then it was proposed recently to come in with the drive-through and smaller, and I think that the developer and CVS were both at the last planning board meeting, and then sat down and now proposed one a little bit larger than they originally had proposed, but not above the 10,000 square feet, and now without. And honestly, I think that that is probably as close as we can get to making as many of the residents happy as possible. There's always going to be those that still say no, but I think that we've done a good compromise, the best that we can come up with. And again, how people vote will depend on them, but I think now we've given them the best possible options that we can. So those in favor of the CVS, I guess we'll do it three ways. The larger CVS? No? No. With the drive-through? No. Without the drive-through? Okay.
All right, it'll be helpful to the planning board.
The smaller size.
Smaller size without the drive-through?
That's the current plan.
Yes. The one that was proposed and hasn't been vetted yet to the public tomorrow night. Anything else we need to vote on that, Laura? That's it.
I think that's it.
Okay. Any comments from the public press? Since there's nobody here, I guess that would be easy. Approval of the minutes from September 7th meeting and from the March 14th meeting.
March 14th is just meeting notes for your information, as we need to approve them as before.
So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of February 7th, 2018 as written? George, thank you. Second?
Second.
Trish, thank you. All in favor? Aye. All right, and the notes are just for us from March 14th. Any new business to come before the board? No? Okay. Do we have any other meetings scheduled, Nora, before?
We don't have any other meetings
Okay.
scheduled, so.
Hold off until the fall and see if
I think
further
so,
action is
yeah.
required.
So then the next item that I think this board will be taking up is getting back to the comprehensive plan. So Abby and I will draft the village center update to the comprehensive plan and then bring it back to this board to comment on and revise.
Okay, and that will probably not happen until the fall?
I would say September.
Okay.
Just to add one thing, I compliment the members of the task force, staff, and the ex officio members. I think I've just spent a tremendous amount of work over the last several years, and I think people have, put the effort in. And I would just thank the fellow task force members for working on this project. Because we all really do care about this town, and we really care about Islington.
Thank you, George. And I would just like to say that, remind the public that tomorrow night is the planning board meeting at 7 o'clock at the Downey School, for those of you that might do this sometime between now and then. So Downey School, 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Planning board will continue its discussion on approval of the Islington Center development.
And the planning board will also meet again on April 10th.
April 10th.
7 o'clock at the Downey School.
Same County, okay, I'll be there.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn?
What are they doing with this bridge?
Oh, the East Street Bridge? Easter Bridge is just continuing with their utility relocation work at this point.
I think they're talking about
I think the plan is
So
that,
our drilling.
yes, there is a lot of drilling,
Yes.
yeah. The plan is to place the new,
Rods.
the new buttresses,
New
yeah,
buttons,
the
yes.
buttons will be placed next, and then eventually the old one's taken down. It's a, you'll see construction there continuing throughout this.
So I've got two big, you can see the two big yellow,
Yes.
whatever they are.
Yeah, drills.
Okay, any other questions? Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right, second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.